Welcome back. Episode 31, Get a Grip on Lighting. Hey folks, this is a review episode. Greg and I are going to roll through each one of our podcasts, talk about what we learned and the experiences and just the whole big ride of becoming the number one podcast on Podomatics Technology section. Number 156 overall, Greg?
Yeah, right in that range.
Something like that. That's right. And so, hey, this is a pretty good one. I liked it. I enjoyed doing it with Greg, just reviewing back where we started and what we learned with each show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Keystone Technologies. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com, baby, KeystoneTech.com. Greg, what's going on with Keystone these days? We're going to talk about drivers, man?
We're going to talk about drivers because, it's starting to get to the point where there's LEDs that have been in the marketplace for a number of years, and a lot of those LEDs have drivers. The issue is that not all drivers are the same, not even close. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of different drivers, and to figure that out is difficult. So what they've come up with is a programmable driver that they actually have a dial on it, and you can adjust the output current on it and the voltage so that you get the right driver.
Hey, Maddie, throw that website up there. Throw that website up there for the YouTube watchers. So this thing's programmable. Have you sold any of these yet, Greg?
I think we have maybe one or two, not many, but it's not, because a lot of the drivers that are out there should still technically be under warranty. Whether they are or not,
promises.
I'll come back to that. But if you can't find it, a lot of them are no-name drivers that you can't find. This is a great option for you because you can really dial it into what you need to match what the fixture is requiring and what the chipboard in the fixture is requiring.
Is it universal input voltage as well?
Yeah.
So go to Keystone Tech.
0 to 10 volt dimming.
Oh man, it's got everything. 0 to 10 volt dimming, universal input voltage, and you can dial up the amps on it, the output amps or milliamps or whatever it is.
Output current, yep.
Output current. Exactly. There it is. So go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com. And we also like to thank the official sponsor of this show, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to NAILD.org. That's nailed.org on information on joining the association or taking some LS1, son. You want to learn about lighting, you got to learn what happened in the past so you don't make the same mistakes in the future. Come on, man. Take yourself some LS1. Don't be afraid to learn. Greg and I like to learn every day, which is why we do this show. Episode 31, Get a Grip on Lighting. Welcome back, yo. It's Greg and Michael from the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Episode 31. You know what? We've kind of hit a milestone here, folks. We're the number one we were the number one. We're back and forth from number one to number two in the technology section on Podomatics. So Greg and I are pretty proud of that. We went up, I don't know how many spaces, Greg, like thousands?
Yeah, hundreds at least. I mean, we've definitely moved up. And number one was just last month. And like you said, it's been teetering back and forth.
And I think we're overall in the talk section, I think we peaked at 175 or 165 or something like that.
We're at like 150 right now. So
yeah, there you
moving
go.
Up.
So moving up.
Yeah.
So there you go. So the people that walk in those spaces, we like to thank all of our listeners for listening and just really pulling us to the top of the podcast heap. And definitely the world's number one lighting podcast is the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, hosted by Michael Colligan and Greg Eric. So we thought what we'd do is we kind of do a quick recap of each episode and talk about a little bit about what we learned and what we, how we felt after each show. So I'm going to start with number one when, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I called up Jason Bader and rented out a sound studio and said, hey, I want to do a podcast, Jason. You want to come on the show? And that was episode 1, and we talked about inventory management. And I remember talking to him and hearing the sound and being recorded and being so nervous. That was my number one reaction in that podcast, was like being nervous.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that Jason talked about, I already sort of knew myself already about, the declining price of LEDs and all that kind of stuff and how hanging on to stock, it's kind of like a hot potato. But more importantly, I remember it was my first podcast and I was alone and I was like, what am I doing? I'm like, can I do this? And I remember hating the sound of my own voice. So, I mean, that was the first one. The second one, I brought you on. And do you remember that show?
For the DLC.
Yeah.
Yeah, DLC with Brady Neiman.
Do you remember all the problems we had getting the Skype set up and all that? Do you remember
It
all
took a
that?
while. Definitely
Yeah.
did.
We're
Yeah.
trying to do it over
No.
Skype and figure it all out. And we brought on Nemeth, and, he kind of clarified a few things for us, but I don't think he answered a ton of questions about the DLC in terms of our, sort of its adversity and the compliance fatigue in the industry. Then we interviewed you, Greg, on show number 3.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I learned is that I can actually talk about myself for 34 minutes with you in the room.
Yeah, there you go. I actually let you talk a little bit on that one, eh? But you know what was
Yeah,
funny
thank you.
about yeah, you know what was funny about that one? It was supposed to be about us, but it just somehow became about you. Do you remember that? You took it
Yeah.
over.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I just kind of started it and then dove in and we kept going with it.
Do you know this is our first podcast, just me and you since that podcast?
Yeah, I guess it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every other one has had a guest.
And the next one, Spencer Miles, that was one that even to this day, the Spencer Miles podcast number 4 is, I think, one of our best. It starts really slow.
Yeah.
That's the problem with it. But we talked a lot, like for lighting distributors. I think if you're out there listening, if you're a lighting distributor, I think number 4 is a really good one for you. And then number 5 is when we chicken-holed Robin Watt into sponsoring the show. I don't know if you remember that. I asked
That
him
was live at Nail or at the Light Fair.
Yeah,
That was the
recording
first
at Light
live
Fair.
one we did.
That was my first time that
Yeah.
I was legally working in the United States. That was the first time I ever did that, right?
Yeah.
And then our breakthrough episode. Tell me about episode 6, Greg.
Yeah, so that's when we met with Randy Reed and someone that I knew a little bit about, really not a lot, but I knew the Edison report and have looked at it and get a lot of news from that. And then what I found out just from talking to him was a lot, and he's really the go-to news source I see in the industry because he's been in it so long and he knows so many people that he really breaks stories and has a good feel and a good grasp on where it is, and he's helping us get a grip, on what's going on in
Yeah,
lighting.
for sure. I think that, what Randy kind of took us to another level. It took us to that more elite level of the lighting business. And after we brought on Randy, it was really easy to get number 7, which was another huge episode for us, which was the DLC executive director, Christina Halfpenny. That was a good show.
Yeah, that definitely was. There's a lot of questions about DLC, and there still are, but we actually went to the show that was out in Portland and sat down with her and had the meeting and the discussion, and it was good. It really got a better understanding on what DLC is all about, and I felt good leaving that we had a good message out there on them.
I think what came out of the DLC thing for me is that that they're doing their best to serve the industry, but it's almost like they act like a government. There's no competition to them. So they're not being sharpened like we are in the field through competitive forces. I mean, they're kind of on their own. They get
Sure.
to do whatever they want, right? And I think that having a competitor is what really makes you elite and swift and slick. And I think the DLC from that, I think the DLC lacks a competitor in that space. And I think that's what I learned there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then Mark Lean, same show, Future of Lighting. What do you think about our show with Mark?
Yeah, Mark's great. I've listened to a number of his presentations and met with him in person, and he's really futuristic looking. And that's what a lot of our podcast is about is looking at what's coming next. And he did a good job of explaining that. But at the same time, also bringing it back and really defining the importance of quality lighting, making sure that still matters in the future. And I think that's something I'm going to, live by and make sure we stand by because that's what really keeps us as lighting distributors relevant.
I think that a lot of the industry is looking like we were racing as fast as we could to get as many rebates and get as many LEDs into sockets and into fixtures out there as we possibly could in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years now. And I think the industry, and I think Mark was one of the guys that kind of stepped back and said, what are we doing here? What about quality of light? We've abandoned like all the principles of it, all sorts of mistakes that had happened and that we had solved in fluorescent and HID technologies had reemerged in lighting. And it was time for the industry to step back and focus on quality and that. And I think that was what I learned from Mark Lean. And that's a great segue into, episode number 9 on LED flicker with Dr. Arnold Wilkins.
Yeah, and hearing that discussion, it really makes you think twice about what you have been doing and what you're going to do in the future, because flicker is a major issue with LED products. Not all LED products, but some of them. And it's really something you have to factor in when you're making your decision on what to specify for an end user.
I mean, if it's some, corridor hallway in the basement of a commercial building, flicker, no flicker, I don't think it really matters if you're pushing a pump truck through it twice a day. But in a classroom, in certain applications, you really don't want those lights flickering. It's where people have to sit in an office all day or in a classroom all day. I think there's applications where it really matters. It would be the best. Would have been better if the industry had thought this through at the beginning.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
What was it? Karl Marx says the past repeats itself. First as farce, then as tragedy. So I think that's what happened to the lighting industry right there. And then what did we do? We flew to Chicago, and again I began my illegal working in the United States with an interview of Bill Brown in Chicago.
Very impressive, man. That guy's done it all.
You know what? He's
been at it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, just the fact that what I learned from him is just how much drive and dedication he's had, and how many years he's been in it, and how he's still in it. He's still active in it. I mean, not as much as he used to be, but he's still in it. He seems to love it. Great company that he has set up. So that was one of our best ones too, I thought.
I think what's interesting about Bill Brown is that the idea of sales agencies, not holding the inventory but selling it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Dude. Yeah. It's like
right.
You don't have to buy the inventory and sit on it in a warehouse. You can just go out and sell it for people and make a lot of money. He's got a huge company, man. I didn't realize how big Bill Brown sales is, dude. That's a monster beast.
Yeah. Yeah, we kept
really
seeing it at Light Fair in previous years and all these different companies affiliated with it, not really understanding what it meant. I still don't fully get it, but I appreciate him and what he's done in the industry for sure.
Well, he's got a combination of things. So he serves a bunch of clients and he reps a bunch of brands. And I think what happens is sometimes he buys the factory that does it, and other times if he sees a gap in the industry and he can't fill it with his line card, he makes it. That's why he's got all those factories. That's what ALP's about, right? So, he just he's looking at the business from a very high level and just running through the seams of it. And he's getting a piece of the action. Really, really smart guy, man. And I love the fact that so many people on this podcast that have come on are either scientists or salespeople. I love that, man.
Yeah, definitely.
It's
really keeps
really
it
cool.
interesting.
For sure.
For sure.
Lighting controls with Jim Benya. I mean, Jim's a legend. I think that he's realistic though with the lighting controls, and I think he brought some brevity to the conversation. He said some things that I think were important, but controls is such a developing thing right now that I don't think that was a definitive podcast. Do you?
Not necessarily definitive. I did get out of them though that lighting controls can be simple. We don't have to. I know we talk a lot about it, the difficulties in the lighting control space right now, but it can be simple. I think sometimes you can overthink it, and that's what I understood from him or learned from him is that don't always overthink it, but consider it for all applications.
I thought you learned that from me.
Maybe it's you. It's been 30 of them, and I talk to you so dang much. I don't know.
And then we brought Jason Bader back on when we were in Portland, and we chatted to him again about inventory management. Believe it or not, those inventory management podcasts, they're not that interesting to me because I'm more interested in sales and science kind of lighting, the science of lighting and selling lighting. But those are really, if you look at Podomatic and you look at the stats, those are popular podcasts, dude. People listen to them. So if you're
it's
into
because money matters.
Money matters. There you go.
Yeah, and that's what he says is all your money is tied up in inventory. You really need to manage it appropriately. And I think both episodes that we did with him were good to really get a good understanding of that and how to manage it better.
So what are your thoughts on PoE? I'll let you go first. On episode 13
I think it's
Wendell Strong. Yeah.
Yeah, a developing technology, something to keep an eye on. I don't know that it's going to take over everything like some companies are thinking it will. I think there's definitely some interest in it, and it's a real technology, I guess, is what I got out of that podcast. Whether it's going to be implemented on a mass scale is another question I have. I don't know.
I think it encapsulates all the worst qualities of the LED business and all of the best qualities of the control business. So it's like the worst part about LED and that you can't replace the parts. Maybe they're incompatible. And then, stuff like that, that you have issues with purpose-built LED fixtures and communicating with each other. And all. But then it's also the best for that deep control. The question is, how many applications actually need that level of control? That would be my concern with it. Like, do you really need to have that much access to a light fixture?
Right. To be determined.
I know. It's like that PoE stuff is really deep. Where are you at with horticultural, Greg?
I haven't done anything on my end for my company, but it's something that, definitely is interesting. They talk about the growth and the potential in the marketplace. It seems hard for a distributor to get involved in that market. I think it's going to be a lot of these companies coming kind of direct, and, whether they work with a distributor or not, I don't know how that's going to work. But, in talking with Dave Inman on that one, it reiterates that lighting can do more now than just light a space. It actually can help you grow plants. And in his case, a lot of it's cannabis, but in their company's case, that's where a lot of the market growth is. But yeah, it's just something to keep an eye on too.
So our most commented on episode 15, the lighting health effects with Greg Yater. It's the most commented podcast on our website. And all the comments are, and this is for all the listeners out there, why were you so condescending to Greg? Why were you Greg Yater and all that sort of stuff? And hey, look, I think Greg Yater's a smart guy. He's a young guy. He's a lighting commentator. He's not a scientist. And I think he kind of swam in deep waters with us, Greg, a little bit, and he maybe wasn't ready for it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just something that, we hear so much of it being talked about, the health effects of lighting. And that was our first discussion on it. And he's new to it too. We're all new, and we're all trying to figure it out. So I don't think anything we meant to do was to condescend or, put him down by any means. I think he did a good job of explaining it. We just don't have the full picture at that point.
And we got a better picture on episode 16 with Dr. Mariana Figueroa. And she straightened out a lot of things that, hey, a lot of this isn't science yet. A lot of it's speculation. And that's where I feel like the health effects of lighting are. I'm not sure if certain companies have done their own research and have, they're not scientists. They're corporations that employ scientists, so they want to keep that data secret of how they're doing it. They don't want other companies to be able to replicate their results. So maybe there is some manufacturers out there that can seriously prove certain things. But I think most of the people, like on the cannabis side with the horticultural, I think most people are making to a certain spec that people believe will improve your health. Is that safe?
I think that's safe as of now. As studies come out, it can get proven. She did point out certain segments of the population that healthy lighting can definitely benefit with the Alzheimer's patients and things like that, and it can actually be done in a somewhat practical manner now. That's out there with color tuning. Things along that line. So, but yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely the developing technology, something that can't be proven yet, but another one to always keep our eye on and see what's going on with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure the mass adoption by, like, say, schools or hospitals of lighting that improves human health outcomes is ready for prime time right now. I still think we're in a beta version of that. And I think most people would agree with me on that, where it's like, okay, yeah, we can try something. Let's give it some time and test it. But I don't think anyone's really, really ready to say, yes, it's time for us to do this, and here's why. I think everybody's kind of speculating.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. And one of the things I learned from that, and maybe I haven't even told you this yet, but we're going to retrofit our whole office, and I'm going to put in color tuning lights and test out the health benefits. So I'll be a subject under this.
So you're going to be a lot fresher.
We'll see.
Then we had the controversial name, number 17, IES Relevance with Tom Butters. That we got a lot of flack for that name, eh? Oh, you're biting your lip, eh, Grady?
But I think it. Yeah, well, just because we didn't mean it to come across that. What we meant is that IES is relevant, and I think that's what we really got out of talking with Tom Butters. It says right on their website they're the lighting authority. I still feel that personally. I think they do a good job of educating lobbying for lighting, doing standards and things that are needed right now, especially more than ever. So I still feel that they're very relevant, and I thought the title was accurate.
Yeah, me as well. I mean, I think if you listen to the show, I mean, was it a little bit salacious of us to call it IES relevance? Well, we are looking for listeners.
Doesn't hurt.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
And then thanks to this podcast, largely thanks to our sponsors, but a particularly committed sponsors, Keystone Technologies, and we were really really happy to have. Oh my gosh, the name is I'm missing the name here for a second. Ira Greenberg, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he did great. You know what? He's like when I met him, I think 5 or 6 years ago. I think he was a little bit uncertain with lighting, and he was sort of quiet, and he was observing and learning. I think he's come so far, dude. He's taken that company so far. It's really unbelievable, actually, what they've been able to do.
Yeah, they've grown tremendously, and we've known those guys over a number of years and seen their growth, and really attributes to their culture. It sounded like, and that's what I got out of that podcast is that they keep their work environment fun. They keep people going there. They hire the right people, and with that, you can really grow a company. They do a good job of that.
And I think the other thing too is their focus on sales and customer service. That's what I love on this show is our focus on sales. But Keystone really is service driven and focused on their partners, their distributor partners. A lot of manufacturers talk about the partnership, but they don't deliver on it. What that means for them is we get to charge you more than you can pay elsewhere.
Right.
Like that's what they mean when they say partnership.
Yeah. And Keystone, from my own experience, is truly a partner. They really work with you and make sure you get what you need when you need it, at the right price too, and the service to back it.
Yeah, and I think they're a model if you want to grow in this business. Keystone's a model for other manufacturers. Back to horticultural lighting. Number 19 with Dave Myers. Was that his name? Dave Myers? Is that his name? Andrew Myers.
Andrew Myers. I think,
Andrew Meyer. Yeah. Sorry, Andrew. But there's 30. This is a body of work we're doing here. We're going through here. You know what? It's hard for distributors like us to get into the horticultural game because it's such an engineered spec thing. And once you have that engineer spec thing, what do you need the distributor for?
Yeah, that's how I felt too. I did, hear from him on the technology and the proven science they do have though behind LED, and it sounds like, truly LED is the best light source for plant growth. At least from what we heard from him.
It's looking
Whether
that
it's
way.
totally proven, I don't know. But
it's looking that way. It would be nice if we could get a guy on. Forget about a lighting guy. Get a guy who's like the general manager of a commercial cannabis operation.
That sounds like 35. Episode 37 or so.
Yeah, I think we're going to do that.
We've got a few in the works. So
yeah.
Definitely.
And then tax deductions. That's one's so popular, dude. A lot of people want to figure that out.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that it's adding another trick to your bag in essential when you're selling a lighting project. There's tax deductions out there. They are confusing to figure out, but they don't have to be. And there are partners you can work with, and it should be something you consider anytime you put together a proposal. So I think, hearing from them, it really made sense.
After that podcast, I'm not U.S. centric, but after that podcast, I think you're talking to your customer about, okay, can you get a rebate? Can you get a tax deduction? And that's it for me after that one. Yep. And then, we rolled in hot, buddy. Right into Frankfurt. And
right on time.
Yeah. We met up with our old buddy Randy Reed again, and this is when we really started to get momentum. We started releasing on a more regular basis. And Randy, that was a really good conversation. We went through so many topics, dude. We couldn't even name the episode because there was so many things we covered in that one.
Yeah, no, it was another great discussion. Anytime we talk with him, and he brought it up, he said, maybe it's too soon. I did one, and then we looked at it, and we said, it's been a year. It's time to talk again, and it's something that a lot happens in a year, and it could be something we have him on even more frequently than that. We have to work that out. But he had in his booth, we actually were live in his booth at Frankfurt, he had that Li-Fi fixture. And I think that's where that term really stuck with me. And it's something that you don't even know, but we have one coming up on with a Li-Fi person. So we're going to schedule that in the next couple of weeks. to really dive deep into that technology.
Well, that's when the Matrix came out, right? So that's when the Matrix,
Yeah.
some people think I'm crazy, but it's a super popular topic with the listeners of this show, is that Matrix and
Mm-hmm.
the surveillance and all that sort of thing. And the promises, man. That came out in that pod, raising the dark curtain on the
Yeah.
manufacturer's warranties. Oh man.
Yep.
So that was a good one. And then we entered the Matrix with Dan Ryan. We had him on, and we really discussed it from a Silicon Valley perspective, because Dan's more of a Silicon Valley. He's a lighting guy, but he's more of a Silicon Valley kind of guy. And we got into that Matrix topic pretty deep with him, and he thought it was crazy until the show was over, and he thought about it for a bit. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah. And I thought you were too until I stopped and reflected and listened back to it. And you talked about walking through the light,
The
the
Matrix.
technology, walking through the matrix. And that's where that whole term, really developed even further. And it's interesting what lighting can do. And kind of hearing it from that Silicon Valley standpoint is totally different than how all lighting manufacturers have been in the past. But it's showing you where the future might go to.
And then we got pragmatic again with Randy Johnson, he's like a lighting guru, dude.
Absolutely. He's one of the guys we've known over the years that nailed conventions, and somebody I'm always willing to listen to and learn from because he's super professional, knows lighting, as good or better than anybody, and knows how to sell it. He talked about adding value, and what's better than that? Because when you add value, you can usually get a price tag for that. And if you don't have value in lighting, then it comes down to price is really the only thing. So he taught us in that podcast a lot about adding value and bringing more to the customer than just a price.
What's funny about Randy? Remember, he was talking to us before. He's like, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. And then I said, well, Randy, we're just going to flick the lighting talk switch on your back.
Yeah.
And you're going to roll.
That's all it took. Yep. And sure enough, what did he do? He rolled.
Yeah, boom. And then rolling right after that, a good segue to that one was, Paul Hafner, who's had such an impact on you and I, and then of course on Nailed and, the developer of LS1 and LS2. And again, not so much of, he talks about value-added selling, but I think what he really does is makes people want to be lighting professionals.
Yes, I think that's a very key point. He's someone that we've looked up to, and we've known since we've been really in the industry. I actually thought he was Nailed when I first started. It took me 2 years to figure out that he was a consultant for Nailed, but he's one that really drove home education, the importance of it, and then also that value pyramid. I thought that was a great point he made, and hearing more about that. And he also ended our podcast for us, which I thought was awesome.
That's the first time anyone did that. But you know what I think it was? I think it was Paul Hafner saying, "Call again. I'm going to end your podcast, you sucker." So that's a good place to stop. Call again. So yeah. Then we rolled with David Nathaniel, who was our first video in studio guest, which was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
He talked.
Yeah, no, I thought that was good. What I took from him is the manufacturer standpoint on some of the same pains and issues we're going through. So we hear about it, from our standpoint, and say, oh, I have the stock of these products that I'm not going to sell, and we have this inventory. We're talking in hundreds and thousands of dollars. He's talking in hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars of inventory that can go obsolete, that he has to keep up with it, and they have to manage. And so you see the pain points from the manufacturers and all the new advancements in technologies.
Yeah, he's a really gracious guy. I'm glad he came on the show. What's funny is that going into episode 26, the Jaga Consortium, I didn't even know what it was until you emailed me and said, hey, we're going to bring this guy on the show.
Yeah. And it's something I heard about in previous years through GE mainly. Said they had Zaga compliant fixtures. So I had to look up what Zaga was, and I still didn't quite get it until after the show, and thought that was a real good one. And I think what they have going is the right idea, and you summed it up best. So let's kick it back to you.
So yeah, I think what's going on with Jaga is, if they can do it, it's a huge mountain in front of them, really, and the mountain's called China.
Yeah.
And
right.
so, but from that perspective, I think he's right. Like sometimes limiting the form factors gives you an opportunity to spend time on places where you actually add value. Whether a fixture is like, does a 4-foot fluorescent tube matter if it's 47 and a quarter or 48 and a half or 46 and a half? They can drive the lumens out of that no matter what. The fact that all of them are 48 inches made it really easy for LED technology to fit in those sockets, and gave it the scope it needed to expand and grow.
Yep.
So I think it's a right point. I think it's a good idea. They got to climb the China mountain.
Yeah.
27 with Corey Schneider. Man, that guy's the best with the LS1 training, eh?
Yeah, and then he really hit home the point again on what this podcast is about too. Is about educating ourselves, educating the industry on what's out there, and also educating the importance of educating your staff on what it used to be and what it is and what to look for. And he does the best job of anybody we know on really bringing in new people to learn about lighting in a quick manner. And he dives into those LS training programs through Nailed, which we both feel is the best training source out there, and he takes it to another level.
Yeah, he really does. Lasers, come on, man, give me your laser speech.
Well, LED is not the only light source out there. I think hearing from that, it's something that I remember seeing a laser a couple of years ago at Light Fair, and kind of getting excited about it, but I never really saw where it was going to go until this podcast that we had with him. Now we can actually see it more again in a practical manner where it can be implemented potentially in fixtures in the future and really fill that space that LED has missed in terms of accuracy of light or pinpointing certain light on certain subjects and things. So I think it's a very viable source and something to keep our eye on, as well as laser lighting.
I think it's a very popular episode too in our analytics. I think a lot of manufacturers are listening to it actually and hearing about laser. From my perspective, I know some of my employees, to go back to the education thing, some of my employees are driving around and going home and watching it on YouTube, watching the show on YouTube, and talking to their hey, you know what? There's going to be lasers coming out at some point, and people are getting excited about it. They know that LED has limitations now. I think one of the things that I saw that kind of went and then it didn't work out was that light emitting plasma. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. I do. Yep.
It was small enough that I thought you could build some reflectors around it, but laser just takes that and destroys that technology. It's way more accurate, and I think it's got an interesting future in this business. What about the Renaissance man?
You know what I really took out of it, it was a good story. He's been in lighting for 50 some years, and he's as excited or more than excited about the future than anybody I know. And that's positive. It's good to hear some positive, because a lot of people are wondering about, well, what's going to happen next? And he's saying, hey, be ready for what's next and be excited about it.
Yeah, and I mean, we grappled with him a little bit. We almost named the show Grappling with a Legend. I don't know if you remember that back and forth, and we went with Renaissance Man because, well, we'll let other people decide who won the grappling. But, I argued with him a little bit in terms of, I challenged him a little bit on some of his stances. But man, that you can tell that guy's passionate about the business. You can see why he would be an excellent sales manager. You can see why he would be an excellent executive, and why he's been so successful, because he's just passionate about it, and that just comes out in his he's got a switch on his back for the business of lighting.
Yeah.
He really does.
He dives right in and gets after it. It's good.
For sure. And it was nice to have Pierre on to talk about Lux as a Service from Spark Fund. I was very suspicious of Lux as a Service, as the listeners to this show know. If you've listened to these episodes, I've always been sort of hesitant. I think he convinced us that there is a certain percentage of the market that are going to want this.
Yeah, he had some proof on certain jobs that they've done, and really what I took out of this, and this is our most recent one, is that there are new players in the marketplace. These guys didn't really know lighting or have any lighting background, but they're out there selling the same type of lighting projects we're hoping to sell in a new creative manner.
Yeah, I don't like those guys.
Got to be aware of them, though, or become one.
Yeah, well, how did the distributor get a piece of that action? It seems like this is why, and maybe we're getting into our next episode here, so maybe we should cut it off because then we wanted to talk about something else. Or should we just keep it rolling right now, Greg? What do you think?
Yeah, you can dive into a little bit. Let's go.
So this we wanted to talk about, what do you hate about lighting? I mean, one of the things that's really driving me crazy about lighting right now and really getting me upset, not upset the right way, but like making me go, man, as soon as I think I got something figured out, everything changes.
Yeah. And this is one that is a major change. If it ever goes, if everybody adopts this model, it's a total change, 180 degree.
Well, you're basically working for Peer then. Hey, Peer, can I get a deal over here?
Right.
I need to
sell some light bulbs for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, don't worry. I'll pay you. But so when he was talking about his buying power, what was interesting was that he's not talking about his buying power on the products. He's talking about his buying power amongst distributors. That's what he was talking about. I don't think he even knew that. But when I reflected on what I learned from the episode, he's not talking about, I buy more, LED T8 tubes than you, Colligan. I got a better price. I got 10 cents cheaper or whatever. What he's talking about is if we go to a large chain of old retirement homes, and there's 400 of them in the state of Massachusetts or whatever, and we're going to retrofit all of them. We're going to turn around and take all that business and bid it out to the local contractors in that area. And that's going to eat our cake a lot, dude.
It is, for sure. Something we got to think about and be ready for, though, definitely.
Call your banker. Call your banker, man. But
as soon as more money. Figure it out.
Dude, it's like we're I'm an entrepreneur. I have other businesses, and they're so simple compared to lighting, dude.
Yeah. Lighting is a confusing space to be in.
Yeah,
and it continues to be even more so.
And it's not as profitable as it used to be. It's a big friggin' price war on top of everything.
Yeah. Well, you can save that for another time.
All right. Well, thank you. That's episode 31. That was a recap of our last 30 episodes. I'm really, to thank all the listeners out there and to thank you, Greg, for partnering with me on this and all of our sponsors and the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. When I looked at that number one on Podomatic, man, when I looked at that thing on there, I just felt to myself like, man, that's crazy cool, man. How did we do this? We started a year and a half ago with a dollar and a dream, and number one on that space. Now, it's not a big deal. It's not iTunes. You know what I mean? But I don't really know what it means, Greg, because I don't do much of the analytics, but it means something, man.
It does, yeah. And a lot of this, you thank me, I thank you for having the vision to do this. I think it's a great source for everybody in the lighting industry to really get a good knowledge, and including ourselves. And that's why we do this is to talk about what's relevant and what we need to be ready for. So let's here's to 30 more at least.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing. I'd say the person that has learned the most is me in doing this show. And so I thank all the guests that have been so gracious with their time to come on and help us start this and really become the world's number one lighting podcast, at least in the English language. So thanks for everybody, listeners, sponsors, guests, and Greg, Eric, and my producers, and everybody that in my office that put up with all the craziness when we started this show. Episode 31, Get a Grip on Lighting. Keystone Technologies. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com, baby, KeystoneTech.com. We're talking programmable drivers with Greg, Eric. Greg, tell me a little bit about these programmable drivers Keystone has.
Well, they actually have a little speed dial, they call it, right on the driver. And that speed dial lets you adjust the output current. And why do they do that? Because there's so many different drivers out in the marketplace, and it's very difficult to find replacement drivers. So they've made it easy so that they can actually do a programmable, tunable LED driver that can work for hundreds of thousands of different fixtures. All you have to do is dial it to what you need, and it will perform the way you need it to. So great option for LED drivers from Keystone, definitely.
Universal input voltage?
And unit 120, 277 volt, and 0 to 10 volt dimming. It's got everything you need.
Ooh, that's a swanky little product. It's a swanky product they got there. So go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com, KeystoneTech.com. And this episode of the podcast and every one of these shows we do is the official podcast of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to naild.org, that's nailed.org, for information on joining Greg and I. It's ours. We own Nailed. No, joining the club. It's a club of lighting dorks that hang out like a Star Trek convention, and we talk about light bulbs all day at the convention. But also we learn a lot. We have a lot of great speakers at the convention. Come on down. Hang out with us, man. Take some LS1. Take some LS2, man. Is there a better path to getting your LC than LS1, LS2?
That is the best by far. I mean, other than experience in the field. So you do that concurrently with those tests. But yeah, you do the LS1, you do the LS2. You study for the LC. I did an LC prep course. I think that's necessary. And then you go take it. Knock it out, and then you're LC for life.
And hey, we'd like to thank everybody that's supported this show. This was a review show. Greg and I looking at our body of work, really stepping back from it and saying, whoa, I can't believe we've done 30 episodes already. It seems like it went by like that, did it not?
It did, super quick, and it continues to go by. We're keeping recording one a week, and we got a lot in the works.
Number one on Podomatic, baby. We're going back. Number one on Podomatic. We're coming for you again. Soon we're the number one podcast on lighting in the world, that's for sure. So you go to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast at getagriponlighting.com. Thanks to the listeners. Thanks to our sponsors for a great ride.
There'll be no redemption today. There'll be no redemption today. In a cabin far from all, immersed in alcohol, the devil appears like a snake in the Garden of Eden. It's